Dzień dobry Państwu.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you at the press conference after the meeting of the Monetary Policy Council. Professor Adam Glapiński, the Governor of the National Bank of Poland, the Chairman of the MPC, members of the MPC, Professor Łukasz Hart and Professor Rafał Sura participate in today's press conference. Information from the meeting of the Monetary Policy Council held on the 5th and 6th November 2019. The Council decided to keep the NBP interest rates unchanged. And reference rate is 1.5, lombard rate is 2.5, deposit rate is 0.5, rediscount rate is 1.75. Global economic growth remains relatively low and uncertainty about the global outlook persists. In the euro area, annual GDP growth in 2019 Q3 declined alongside the ongoing downturn in industry. In the United States, economic conditions continue to be relatively strong. However, GDP growth in 2019 Q3 in the US economy also declined. At the same time, in China, economic activity growth continues to slow down. In recent months, inflation declined in many countries and continues to run at a moderate level, supported by lower oil prices than a year ago. In particular, inflation is low in the euro area. The European Central Bank is keeping the deposit rate unchanged after lowering it further below zero in September. At the same time, the ECB has resumed the asset purchase program and signaled the maintenance of loose monetary policy in the coming quarters. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates again in October. In Poland, economic conditions remain good, although the incoming data point to a possible decrease in the economic growth rate in the third quarter 2019, mainly due to the economic downturn abroad. However, rising consumption fueled by increasing employment and wages, very strong consumer confidence and social benefit payments exerts a stabilizing influence on GDP growth. At the same time, the incoming data indicate that investment continues to rise, albeit at a slower pace. Inflation in October 2019, according to the Central Statistics Office flash estimates, stood at 2.5% year-on-year. Food price growth, despite a gradual slowdown, remains elevated and is contributing to high inflation. On the other hand, lower energy prices than a year ago, including fuel prices, are having a curbing effect on price growth. At the same time, in the recent period, core inflation has risen but continues to run at moderate levels. The Council became acquainted with the results of the November projection of end inflation and GDP under the assumption of unchanged NBP interest rates. The November projection takes into account data and information published up to the 18th of October 2019. In line with the November projection based on the NECMOD model, there is a 50% probability that the annual price growth will be in the range of 2.2–2.4% in 2019 against 1.7–2.3% in the July 2019 projection, 2.1–3.6% in 2020 compared to 1.9–3.7% and 1.6–3.6 in 2021 compared to 1.3 up to 3.5%. At the same time, the annual GDP growth, according to this projection, will be within a 50% probability range, in the range of 3.9–4.7% in 2019 against 3.9–5.1 in the July 2019 projection, 2.7–4.4% in 2020 compared to 3 up to 4.8% and 2.3–4.2% in 2021 compared to 2.4 up to 4.3% according to the previous projection. In the Council's assessment, the outlook for economic conditions in Poland remains favorable, and GDP growth, despite the expected decline, will continue at a relatively high level in the coming quarters. At the same time, there remains uncertainty about the scale and persistence of the slowdown abroad and its impact on domestic economic activity. Inflation, after a temporary rise in the first quarter of 2020, will stay close to the target in the monetary policy transmission horizon. Such an assessment is supported by the results of the November NBP projection of inflation and GDP. The Council judges that the current level of interest rates is conducive to keeping the Polish economy on a sustainable growth path and maintaining macroeconomic stability. The Council adopted the inflation report November 2019 and the resolution on the principles for creating and releasing the provision against the foreign exchange rate risk of the zloty at the National Bank of Poland and amended the resolution of the NBP accounting principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Governor. Please ask your questions. Mr. Tuszyński, Polish Press Agency, Economic Division. The first question that always pops up, what's the path of interest rates that the projection supports? Well, the one that is foreseen in the projection. I'm asking about the 100% path. Well, you surprised me with this question. As far as I'm concerned, I've spoken about it a lot of times, and I believe that the interest rates will not be changed until the end of my term, and this finds its confirmation in this projection. It's based on the intuition because we can project with high probability for the next 2 years. Mr. Professors, if you allow me, Mr. Tuszyński, I also share the opinion that in the nearest quarters there's no basis to or no grounds to change interest rates. I believe that this current level of interest rates serves Polish economy in the most optimum way, and we have the data that flow from this current projection, and they speak clearly that after the temporary increase of inflation and the deviation from the target, it will head towards the center of the range. And it's worth adding that it can happen that the inflation will be a bit lower than the one shown in the projection, for the reason that we have a very conservative approach that says that energy prices next year may increase by 8%. It seems to me that last year in November I claimed that in 2019 energy prices will be kept on the level of 2018, and this is the statement that I support today. And this inflation path shown in this current projection may change by 0.3%. So I believe that you assume that the prices for households will increase or decrease next year. Yes, I believe so. So in the presumption of the National Bank of Poland, there's always this conservative approach to the problems. We don't include any political problems here or decision-making issues, only the things that we can project based on the data. And as you can remember, we foresee this path, we have foreseen it before, and it didn't happen. If it happens, then the inflation will be lower. It's better to be surprised in a good way. If you allow me, the projection does foresee the increase of inflation even by 3.5% at the beginning of the next year, and we agree with it. The question is what happens next. If it arrives at this point, how fast will the inflation go back to the inflation target? I mean the wages, fast-growing loans. We have it at the historically high level, and I could speak about post-inflation effects for a long time, but there's a but, and this is a slowing down economy in Germany, a lack of reliability of, and this is not a moment that we can speak about the change of parameters of the monetary policy. If those inflation factors would prevail and the inflation would be slower than we foresee, and the inflation arrives at 3.5 or 3, and I wouldn't see a realistic prospect of this going back to the inflation target. I would probably speak for the increase of interest rates next year. I can understand that you have the strategy of wait and see. This is Professor Hart's approach. Of course, in the Council we have different approaches. We also have to think about decreasing interest rates. In general, the Council states that the interest rates should not be increased in the projection, and that's why in my opinion, with high probability, interest rates will not be increased. There are pro-inflation factors, there are factors that speak against the inflation, and they balance each other. Please, next question. Dorota Bartyzel, Bloomberg News. Looking at the numbers that we have received today as regards inflation and as regards the increase of GDP, I'm quite surprised, because I believe that for the last 2 months you have stated that you expect a bit higher inflation, but the inflation stays at the unchanged level, despite the fact now it grows in the first quarter of next year. Yes, and then it decreases. Yes, and in average it's close to the target. It's a bit higher than the inflation target. But there is a huge change regarding GDP. It seems to us, as far as we can say today, that the increase foreseen in the projection is far lower than the one that was foreseen in the July projection. Well, whether it's a bit higher, it's less than 4% next year. Yes, it's less than 4% yes, next year, and it was obvious from the very beginning. It wasn't obvious looking at the July projection. Yes, looking at the projection in July, it was the case, but we are looking at the situation in Germany. There is a negative result in Germany, and the whole Western Europe, the whole Eurozone, the USA. Well, it's not the internal factors that decide about this increase that will be a bit lower. Looking at the model that we have, we can arrive at the conclusion that it can be at 2.6 in 2020 and 2.3 in 2021. But if it's higher, we will not be surprised. Well, the question that I haven't still asked is that everyone knows that the sentiment globally is to ease the monetary policy, and in the scenario that we can see is that we are afraid, or we have some concerns regarding the economic growth, and the inflation stays quite safe. Isn't it conducive to sharing this sentiment of easing the monetary policy? And to support my question, I would like to remind you that you have once told us that the next move, if we are to cite your intuition, that would be to decrease, right? Well, I support this statement. If the interest rates would have to be changed. It would be lowered. It would be decreased, not increased. But this is my private main path, is that the interest rates will not be changed. And the slowdown will be insignificant, and we are waiting for the economic situation to become better in Germany and in the Eurozone. And this is what can be said. And of course, the world is not in crisis. This is not what we would say. In China, we have slowed down, and the world is not in a crisis. But it's in stagnation. Well, there is a slight positive result. The interest rates are higher than there were. These are very good interest rates. Our growth rate is 3.5% of GDP growth annually. Well, I believe that it's purely hypothetical. I wouldn't say that this natural interest rate reflects anything. Well, even if we achieve 3.3 in 2021, this would be still a very good growth rate.
Yes, next question, please. Dear Governor, I have another question. For several months, we've had this belief that we are dealing with an economic miracle in Poland. No, I mentioned economic miracle and I sustain this position. Something we used to call economic miracle in Germany was nothing better. In Poland, we have observed long-term economic growth under the condition of low inflation, plus macroeconomic balance and industrial balance. It is a miracle, and 7% of growth of wages per annum and equilibrium in the economy. You're not the only one to believe in this miracle, but there might be some voices that mention that there are some clouds seen on this beautiful sky of the economic miracle. Yes, we can see clouds in the Mediterranean shore countries, but it is a cloud with a slight rain. Actually, I don't see any storms here coming. As regards the situation in the economy, we are discussing loans, including mortgages. We are discussing consumer loans. We are discussing the situation in the banking sector. But these are discussions, and the information that we have at hand does not indicate risks, huge risks, although there might be some clouds. A huge cloud is the economic situation in Germany. But please remember that the economic situation and economic conditions are positive. They have low unemployment rate, and they have a lot of burdens such as migratory flows and so on, but the general situation is quite good. So what are you pointing at? I'd like to point at the decision of the Court of Justice of the European Union when we speak about loans in Swiss francs. JP Morgan published a report today, and it is indicated that Poles are determined to fight for their rights at courts. And there are some estimates that indicate that this might be a huge cost, 11 billion euros in total. There used to be 4.6 billion before the decision of the Court of the Justice of the European Union. Now we hear 11 billion euros. Well, it depends on court decisions of Polish courts as well, and Polish courts are independent and they are free to made their own decisions, so it is not a catastrophe so far. There is no such a huge deterioration of the situation of banks, and although there were some drops in the prices of shares and securities, but now the situation has improved. Now, presidential election. President Duda announced conversion of loans. So are we facing a risk of that? No, there are no risks. Before parliamentary elections, there were some words about the deterioration of situation, and there are no shocks to the economy as a result of the parliamentary election, and we do not expect serious hurdles. Polish economy is very boring since it is stable. We can see equilibrium. It is still growing at a slower pace, but still within the 2-year horizon we are going to see some growth, including growth in wages levels. So this is what it looks like. Other questions? Yes, Mr. Tuszyński. I've got a question about the resolution about the risk against the currency risks, exchange rate risks. Are there some significant changes? Right, so the Monetary Policy Council and the board have been discussing this resolution for a year already, at least a year, and there is an impulse. In 2017, there were some negative financial results, and the situation remained unchanged since 2010. As regards actions against the foreign exchange rate risks, but a lot has changed since then, and our reserves increased, doubled. They increased twice within the last 5 years. 30 billion is the increase in the as regards this figure when we speak of reserves. And we speak about the stability of the National Bank. We are speaking about stability of the exchange rate and financial results stability. So the reserves are growing, and they are going to be threefold. We are going to see a threefold increase, so this is going to be a safety cushion, and it will stabilize the financial results of the National Bank in accordance with the Act on the National Bank of Poland, obviously. And we act using our intuition, and this resolution will operate for at least 10 years, I believe, maybe 8 years from now. There will be some amendments. The reserves are going to be growing, maybe at a slower pace, starting with 2021. As regards 2017, the losses as regards differences in exchange rates were huge, and the reserves were not enough to cover losses. Therefore, the result of the National Bank of Poland was negative in 2017. We consumed the entire reserve. And what has changed as regards this resolution means that the reserve is going to increase based on the balance sheet, and we have foreign currency as part of our reserves, and we've decided that there will be some changes compared to what was going on 10 years ago, and it is going to be more optimal compared to a suboptimal approach previously. In 2007, we had minus 12.5 billion. In 2017, minus 2.5 billion. Also, we used the entire reserve, so the entire reserve was used, plus there was minus 2.5. And when there are changes in exchange rates, the losses are growing, obviously. So do you believe that this is the right moment for these amendments? Because, of course, the state is saying that the budget is in a good shape. It will be no more than 3% as regards the deficit. We cannot mix financial result with the surplus and the profit. We are not saying what is profit going to be. We usually announce it in late March, at the end of the quarter, after the audit report is approved. After the end of the calendar year, we do have some knowledge about that. It depends on appreciation, depreciation of the currency, operational results, changes in bonds and prices in the world market, and many other factors. As regards the budgetary situation, it's not my task, but the previous government before the election declared the results, and we believe that the conservative approach to budgetary issues is a proper approach, and we will comment on the new figures as regards to the budget, but I believe that the state budget is in good shape. The government has an ambitious task to reach a zero deficit level in the next budget, although there are no national or international obligations in this regard. But the government wants to see better financial results also in terms of the budget. But we're not obliged to do that, although it would be good to see the decreasing deficit. Zero deficit is an ambitious goal, but the discussion about 30-fold changes does not mean that this ambitious goal is not achievable. And this is about 5 billion, more or less.
You have mentioned before that the Council discussed the question of the mortgage loans issues. Well, the Council discussed these issues after the publication on the housing market. Some economists point to the fact that probably we have to deal with a growing bubble. Well, no research has confirmed this, no data from the banks confirm this. We don't have to deal with anything like this, but we do observe it. Why? Because this is a bubble that happens more frequently on the markets. It's similar to the agriculture and the swine cycle. Well, of course, there's a longer production cycle. And the construction is financed from construction loans, etc., etc. But as far as the payment of credits, there are no concerning signals on the part of the banks and on the side of the consumers. But the bubble can occur because the construction cycle is quite long, and developers may cause the situation. Well, I'm thinking what we were discussing so long today. Well, I would be happy to learn about this. Well, we have 10 members of the council. Everyone speaks, and we have very positive results, economic results in general. We have looked at the projection with satisfaction. We have very good projection, and every member of the council spoke more about what they expect in the global economy, in the national economy. Well, as far as demographic changes are concerned, it doesn't evoke our concerns, and well, every member of the council has its special interests, for example, consumer loans, and they analyze whether there is anything that we should be afraid about. There are members which are interested in energy prices, also in foreign markets, and they follow the news. And we learn a lot of news that we don't get from the bank because it's mainly taken from the foreign documents. As a governor, I'm an optimist because I can see that even looking for some weak points with a strong flashlight will not bring any results. There were some discussions in the recent months as to whether the interest rates are not too low, whether they should be increased. But the discussion has disappeared because the results are very good, and we hope that we will wait until the situation when the economic situation in Germany will become better. We will, as soon as we see this move in a positive direction, that would bring a great relief to entrepreneurs. Well, people do read newspapers, they watch TV, and they can see the results. We have frequent meetings with entrepreneurs. Every division has their questionnaires that they give to the entrepreneurs, and they meet with them, and we listen to them. They fill in the questionnaires, and they are afraid and they are concerned about the situation in Germany. We have time for one more question. I would like to ask whether, coming back to the mechanism of creating the reserves, have you estimated how it can influence the income into the budget? Well, it can turn out two ways, depending on what's going to happen with the economy. On the one hand, we are increasing the reserves twofold. The results will be increased twofold, and we are going to construct. So we will decrease, speaking briefly, what we gain as profit, and some percentage of this will flow into the budget. At the same time, we change the method of accumulating this budget. This will be accumulated in a more stable way. Well, it will be dependent on each year. It will not be the way that was the case in the recent years, that we have this positive results of exchange rates differences, and the whole reserve is already filled in, and then the whole of it, 8 or 9 billion, 95% goes to the budget. It will not be the case. Always half of it will go into the construction of the reserves, but it's not that nothing will go to the reserves. So the mechanism will be, coming back to the question, that we will flatten the stream of possible payments. Well, yes, and we will flatten the result of the bank. Well, because there will be a huge payment, then there will be no payment. So it depends on the exchange rate. Well, and the payment may be lower depending on the results, depending on the exchange rates differences. So you could have this reserve system. Well, undoubtedly, at the beginning, when I was in the council, it was a good compromise, and it worked. The basis of the change is that the risks and the deviations have grown twofold. I can add one more thing. Right now, we have analyzed the situation again in all the European banks, in the whole European zone, in the euro system, and right now our solution is even closer in all parameters to what's going on in the European banks, in the euro system. We have to end our conference. Thank you very much for today's meeting. We would like to invite you on the 12th of November, Mrs. Bartyzel. I'm sorry. To be honest, Mr. Hard keeps using some words, some intriguing words. So, as regards the word flattening, well, the mechanism of creating a reserve is a technical issue. And in the estimation of risks, we use some levels of probability, some parameters. So this is the word that I've used today are quite technical, because the change is technical and it's quite significant. While it's significant, should we understand flattening as a higher probability of regular payments of profit into the budget, regardless of their amount? If we have profit, but the payments will not be as huge as they used to be, we will not have those jumps. We cannot inform anyone during the year what the payment will be, what the profit will be, because, well, we have exchange rate differences, and they influence the result. Right now we can see that Polish zloty is appreciated. We don't know what the situation will be until the end of the year. The paradox is that the better was the Polish economy, and the stronger Polish zloty was, the worse the result was, and there was no payment. So this was the paradox. Well, we're trying to do as European banks do, although there is a huge difference because we have Polish zloty and they have euros. We also have gold, but we don't take it into consideration. I would say that we are beginning the period of the end of the year quite optimistically, and well, due to this gold, we cannot overestimate it. It increases the prestige of our bank. We have this average global level, and our feeling of securing reserves increases the reliability of our bank. This is the structure that we've worked on for the last year, and the public opinion was concerned with other events, and we were working. I would like to say thank you to the bank staff, to a few departments that dealt with it, to the board that carried out a huge work preparing the project. I can say the following. As far as the board is concerned and the council, we had agreement in all the issues, and we avoid some solutions regarding the reserves. As far as interest rates are concerned, the situation is similar. If individual opinions are different, well, that's quite well. I wouldn't feel well if all the members of the council were of the same opinion. I used to be a senator a long time ago, and it was boring because of it. So the discussions are very interesting. Well, discussions or theoretical. Well, sometimes it is in this way that one speaks his opinion, and then there is this discussion. Well, in our opinion, this is good. And before that, a huge group of the bank staff worked on this. This was the staff from different departments, from economic analysis department in particular. Well, there were various reasons for this meeting today that was held quite long. I had to leave. Well, we started late, so there are some external factors, and there are things going on. I should be isolated on that day fully, but I'm not. No bank does this. Of course, we don't have our phones. We are verifying whether we have eavesdropping. But nevertheless, there are some decisions that need to be taken. Your situation is that you couldn't be nervous that some decisions would be important. I would say that it was boring. You can't expect an increase of interest rates for the next quarters unless something extraordinary happens in Germany. Well, let's take Polish export. It operates very well, and it increased. The export to Germany has increased. And we know that the car industry operates well. We have increased an export of vehicle parts to Germany. And, well, if we start to become concerned, if this economic situation in the West continues to decrease, we will inform you. And we will have this different approach then. So far, we are focusing on 2021 as regards the budget perspective, budgetary framework, and there might be some interesting events on the way, but so far, this is a miracle, and when you live in a situation of a miracle, you do not see that. But if you compare it to the previous situation, when somebody else was governing the bank under a more difficult situation, they would have noticed that this is a miracle now. When I've been part of the Monetary Policy Council, and Professor Kazimierczak cooperated with us, and the situation was really very stormy, and some people wanted to increase, some people wanted to decrease rates, and it was very difficult to reach a consensus. There was one mistake that we made a decision at a delayed pace, but the situation is never perfect. Thank you very much for participation in the press conference, and see you again soon. Thank you.